Howdy, folks. Crazy old lady here. I've been reading my Bible, studying the internet, looking at pictures on Facebook and all that silly stuff. But I come across some things that um, I think I need to spread to you. Like, I was in a conversation yesterday with some folks on another website, and they were part atheist, part half believers. They find all the different contradictions in the Bible, and they say, well, it can't be so because God doesn't contradict himself, and so on, which is very true. God doesn't contradict himself. But most of us folks out there reading the Bible or just listening to the preacher on Sundays don't have the brightest idea on how these Bibles were put together. So let me give you a little bit of a feedback here. Um, Way back years ago in Jesus' time, most people did not write or read. They relied on the scribes of the village. Now, because of that, most everything is carried in tales, family traditions, where you talk about Uncle Joe being in World War II and the things that he went through, or various other things. The family carries it on and tells stories, and that's how it gets carried from generation to generation. And most people were, I guess, told to memorize these things from the Bible so that they could pass it on through their tribes, through their groups of people, their families, their kinsmen, to keep the traditions going. Well, you know as well as I do, well, I'm old enough to know. You might be young enough to never heard of it. Back in my day, we used to take a long, long string and two cans, the tomatoes or beans or whatever came in, punch a hole in the can and put that string through it, tie it, pull it real tight, and the person at each end could hear and talk to the person on the other end. That was our telephones when I was a kid. We used to get a kick out of doing all that stuff. But in the process of talking back and forth, what made everything so fun and funny was because what one person spoke into it was not necessarily what the person on the other end was hearing. And you had to repeat what you heard. And that's where the funny part come in. And some words got twisted all around, and we used to have a blast. But I think that's what's happened to the traditions of the preachings, the teachings that's been passed down through families and generations and tribes. During that time, people will change a word, change a phrase, change a meaning so that it would all work together so they could get the story told. And finally, the days come when people were starting to write this stuff down. So naturally, what originally came out of, we'll say, Moses' mouth, what originally came out is not necessarily what ended up getting written down. So you have to look at the past traditions of the Israeli tribes and the Hebrew people. I get stuck on names sometimes. The Jews, Hebrews, and Israelis. I know they are kind of like three different groups, but they're still all from the same tribes. The same 12 groups that Jesus and God's picked. But anyway, the tribes, even though they started writing these things down, was not always exactly what was originally said or done. So we have to allow for that. Now, on top of that, the folks over there spoke several different languages. I think there's 70 to 100 different languages in those different tribes over there. Different accents, like we've got a Yankee accent and a Southern drawl. There's different accents, different. So sometimes the translation, when one tribe is trying to translate another tribe's writings, would not always get it right. And then, of course, we went from Hebrew and Aramaic and those other languages into Greek and Latin, and then transferred over to English. And some of those words just don't match up. They don't have, some of the words in Aramaic don't exist in Greek. So they have to read what they're writing down and fill in what they think is appropriate for that meaning or that word. So that causes some changes in the Bible. The basic meaning of the stories is what I think God wants us to understand. That's why he gave us parables. He wants us to use our brain. That's what he gave it to us for. Use our brain to read and come to our own understanding as to what he's trying to say. Now, I like to use this analogy. If there's 5 people standing on a street corner and they witness an accident, okay, the police show up, they take everybody's report. Every single one of those people saw something different. They will either say that one car was coming one way and so on, and they hit each other, and somebody else will say, well, he backed into him, but he ricocheted off from this tree over here. Somebody else will say, well, it was a purple car, and somebody else will say it was a silver car. There's always confliction between a story. Even if they seen the exact same accident, they're going to come up with different tidbits of information. And it's up to that officer to take all that information and put it together and make some sense out of it. And I think that's what we're supposed to do with the Bible. The information is there. Sometimes it seems all jumbled up. And I'll give you an example. I was reading through Revelations and Daniel's a few days ago, and it seemed like it was repeating the same thing from the chapter before. But there's a little more information in it this time around. But then when I read it a third and fourth time, I realized that it was talking about the first time that Messiah was here and the second time that Messiah was here. So it's comparing both times, but giving us a little more information what to expect. And I think that's how the Bible, why it confuses so many people. You have to read it, first of all. Don't trust the preachers at church. Their job is to teach religion. Okay? A good part of religion is to keep the people in order. Give us something to anchor to, because we all have the question, why are we here? How did we get here? What are we supposed to be doing here? And why do crazy things keep happening? So it's up to the preachers, the priests, the old-time priests. It was their job to keep control of the people by helping giving them answers. And that's part of religion. Part of your faith or belief system is the belief in God and the faith that he is there guarding us and guiding us, showing us what's right and what's wrong, helping us make it through our experiences here on earth. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos, then you know I'm just a crazy old lady with all kinds of outside-of-the-box thoughts. However, they are what made sense to me in all my years of all my questions. And I've done a lot of reading. I don't have a whole lot of footnotes to give to you. I've read through some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Bible, the Quran. Excuse me, I've been through, I've read through some of the Torah, all kinds of different books. The lost books of the Bible, the ones that were never put in the Bible. And you have to realize that when King James, the King James Version, was ordered, the king was once again trying to stop the battles between the different religions. He was trying to get us all to form into a belief system. Instead of having, I'll use this for an example, the Lutherans and the Catholics and the Protestants and the Pentecostals and the Mormons, and instead of having all these different factions of religion, trying to combine them. And I believe that's why he ordered the King James Version, to get the parts of the Bible or the stories or the scriptures that the people tended to read and like to hear about the most popular, and put them in one Bible for everybody to learn from. And that's why we have the Bible. That and through other years, but King James is most responsible for this one. But in the process, there was a lot of books of the Bible that was never put in the Bible because the preachers didn't feel at that time. You remember that they had wars going on. They had certain, like the Romans come in and took over the Israel territory, and there were so many different things going on. You really kind of have to know history to understand a lot of it. But the preachers pretty much put a kibosh on a lot of the books of the Bible because they didn't follow the current times and behavior of the citizens and the country around them. They were, I'll use this another example. At one time, they were afraid of being harassed and beheaded by the Romans for believing in certain things or saying certain things. So those scriptures that were written by Jesus or any of the disciples that might do anything to flare up the Romans, they hid in jars. That's why we have the Dead Sea Scrolls. Many of the religious groups went off and went into their own part of the world, so to speak, and I think that's where the monks come from, because they kind of went off into their own group. They started their own little village, and all those people there believed the same way. Kind of like, I guess you might even call it a cult in today's time. But they all believed in their own same way, so they went off to themselves and did their own thing, and they didn't bother other people, and other people didn't bother them. So in the process, though, a lot of scriptures and a lot of information has been left out of the Bible. So when you read through your Bible, you have to think of these things. And now, one thing that struck me the other day while I was going through it, way back when, I've been hearing for years and years that they need to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem before the day of the Lord returns. I've also heard that they're trying to put back the candlesticks and all the different hardware, the bowls, the feast tables, and so on, that they're trying to remake those so that they're ready for the temple. And I'm here to say, I don't believe we're supposed to build a third temple. God is bringing the temple back here. And we've heard people are always looking for Noah's Ark. They tend to believe it's still up there in the mountain of Ararat in Turkey, which is quite possible. They just haven't found it because it's mostly ice way up there in them peaks. And they think they've found it, but nobody's ever really gotten close enough to find. Then also I hear of groups that think that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia, in a very small church down there in Ethiopia. Well, the church there in Ethiopia refuses to let anyone in to see this Ark of the Covenant. They say it's their job to protect it until the end times. So they refuse to let anybody in. So how do we know if it's even there? I personally figured that once the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, that the stuff, the bowls, excuse me, candlesticks and all the things made out of gold and stuff, a good share of that stuff may have been saved by the priests and may have been hauled off to other areas. Whether or not that's true, we don't know. We've never found the stuff. But I believe that when God allowed the temple to be destroyed that time, it was because his people were not listening to him. They weren't following the rules. They weren't following his covenants. They weren't following anything. They didn't believe Jesus was here. They were just totally not doing anything. And I think that's when God threw his hands up and said, hey, I've tried, I've showed you, I've brought you out of Egypt, I've fed you, I've protected you, I've done everything I can, and you rebellious bunch of kids, you won't do anything I've asked you, you won't follow me, so here you go. You think you know it all, so here you go. You do it yourself. And we'll just let you see how long this goes on. And I think at the time that he threw up his hands and let the world have at him, destroy the temple, I believe he brought the Ark of the Covenant with him. He had the power. That was his holy seat in the temple. So when he left us, I believe he took his holy temple seat with him, the Ark. Always have believed that. And I found the passage the other day that says that he did. So, folks, anybody that's looking for the Ark of the Covenant, you can stop looking, stop wasting your time and your money, because you're not going to find it till God brings it back with him. And here it is. I have to put my eyeballs on so I can read it to you, folks. Revelation 11:19. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his covenant, the ark of his testament. And there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. Okay? So there you go. That testimony right there. It's in heaven with him. So quit wasting your time. Now the Noah's Ark, that's quite possible. That was human made. That was human used. It's quite possible that's still up there in those mountains. We just haven't found it. I believe that like the Dead Sea Scrolls and some of the archaeological finds that they're coming up with, like the one I've just recently been reading about underneath the Western Wall in Israel, goes back to the days of Herod. They're fixing to get it ready to turn it into a museum type thing, I believe. God is letting us find those things in these days to help us work along. So if you want to know what's going on in the real world, you want to know what's going on in God's world, find the information on the Dead Sea Scrolls and read some of that, because I believe some of those scrolls will help fill in your information. I also felt, I don't remember which book it was I was reading, and I'm really sorry. I asked God to help me remember it, and I haven't had one of those dull moments yet. But one of the books I was reading explained to me, or gave me the impression, that the Garden of Eden stretched from the Sinai Peninsula almost to Egypt, that it stretched from there all the way across through Israel and across to the Euphrates River, then north and south. But that's a long distance. I had no concept whatsoever that the Garden of Eden would be so big. I really didn't. I was thinking like this small town or something. However, according to what I was reading, I believe it was in the books of Adam and Eve, but I really can't remember for sure, because I've read through the books of Joshua, the Judas Iscariot, Mary Magdalene. Those are interesting books. You get a lot more information out of them. But I thought that was kind of interesting, because I always thought the Garden of Eden was a smaller place. And here it looks like, by the description that God gave in that part of the book, or Jesus, was that it was quite large. And it may explain why God is so bound and determined that Israel, the place on earth that Israel has been given, the land area, why God is so partial to that piece of land. Maybe small, and it may be insignificant to the rest of us human beings, but to God, that's his place. And that's probably why, because the Garden of Eden was there. That's where he started, and that's where he's going to stop. We're all like that. We may be born in one state, but move to another state with our family for jobs or whatever the case, and yet our hearts always belong to that first place. So God's no different than us. He's just more important than us. So there you go. There's a couple of things that I've had to say, and folks, don't fall into this atheist and all this silly information about the contradiction of the books of the Bible. Don't fall into that. Dig the Bible out and read it. God will help you understand the parts that you need to understand. Each one of us is here on a different learning curve. Some of us, He has put a veil of blindness on us so that we don't see. It helps protect us in the end times. And some of us, He's taken the veil off, opened the ears, smacked us in the head, and said, hey, look, pay attention here. This is what you need to know. This is what you need to teach. So each one of us will see and read different things. But if you ask for His guidance, He will speak to you. You got to leave your heart open. Get that heart open, because until you do that, it's like walking into a brick wall. He's not going to hear you. If you can't hear Him in here, He's not going to hear you. We're all connected to Him in this spirit way, and until you open that line of communications, He's not going to bother with you. He'll just stand there and wait for you to fall down and pick you up and screw you on your way again. He's there for you. All you got to do is ask. Believe me, He is there for you. And I know it's a hard concept for people to grasp, but if you practice it every day, 3 or 4 times a day, however many you want, in the morning, at night, it doesn't matter. He's there for you. Just like your mom and dad, doesn't matter what you need or when you need it, they're there for you. Well, He is the ultimate Father, and He is there. Just ask Him, and He'll help you. So good luck, folks. Get into that Bible. We don't have a whole lot of time left. And I know I sound like a crazy old lady, but that's all right. People made fun of Jesus when He came. They didn't listen to Jesus when He came. They wanted to sacrifice Him and not pay attention. So I don't expect any better treatment. I know people are going to make fun and call me crazy old lady, and I don't care. I'm just doing my job. He says pass the word on the best you can. Try to help people to understand, and that's what I'm trying to do. So good luck to you. Read your book, and if you don't think I'm crazy enough, check out some of them other videos I got in there. I talk about aliens and angels, and I might have you convinced that they all exist before it's over with. Check it out. See you later. Thanks for coming by.